Okay, we are back, and we have it stitched here so that it's holding all our pleats on the top. We're going to keep them clipped on the bottom. It's been pressed a little bit, so it's holding its pleats fairly well, but we want to just keep that there. Now we have it all ready for the last two pieces to go on, because I also while I was there stitched the sides like this, and one of these sides is going to be folded back like this, and that'll be the front overlap side. So for now we're going to just roll that up and set it aside, and we're going to take another piece of fabric. This one is a piece of cotton, because I'm using cotton flannel for the kilt, so this works well together. Get all those little strings off. And we're going to cut. So we're going to cut this piece to go on the inner band, and it needs to be the width of the kilt, because it's going to lay right here. And what that does is it keeps it from really stretching out. My first one I made without that, thinking, oh, that's not necessary. Oh, it's very necessary. So we'll measure how much we have to be sure, so that we can cut that piece to fit exact at the top here. Okay, get the right side of the tape measure. This is my favorite tape measure. It's 120 inches long, so you can measure just about anything with it. And you want to measure it right at the top there where the stitching is, so that you don't make it too big. Then we're going to add an inch to the total measurement so that we can turn it under on the ends. So our whole kilt measurement is 58 inches. So we need 58 inches of this material. And I just, for my own sake, want the Seahawks all facing the correct direction. So we're going to fold it like this. I don't want them running sideways and looking weird, even though it's inside. And again, I'm going to cut my salvages off the ends. My husband's first kilt is a Seahawks kilt, and it has John Deere material for this piece, and so he's complained about that. So I decided the Kraken and the basic McGee tartan colors will have Seahawks material inside, so that, you know, can make up for the other one not having that. Gotta make the customer happy, right? So this only goes to about 42 inches, so we're going to need two pieces to put together for that, which is perfectly fine. We can totally do that. And we want it to be 5 inches wide. So we come back here to our handy dandy little tape measure, which is 6 inches. So all we have to do is take 1 inch off there. There we are, 5 inches. take our chalk and just mark our line. Super easy with this one. It's not as long, right? So once again, match that up. And draw our cutting line across. There we go. And I'm going to just trim this little side down because it's easier not to have to deal with all these little fuzzies where it's unraveling on the edge. That way I always manage to make sure I get everything in the seam where it belongs instead of missing it amongst the fuzzies. And these are just where the fabric is fraying. And on the bottom of your kilt, by the way, you can always just let it do a single stitch instead of a rolled hem and let it fray. My husband happens to prefer not to have it frayed, so. Okay, so now what we're going to do is stitch this together here. Then we're going to measure it out to the 58 inches. And I'll remeasure that to be sure. Then we're going to baste it onto the top of the kilt. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get the second half done. Because the next part is we are going to need a waistband for our kilt, and we want that to be about 1.5 inches there to 2 inches. So we really wanted about 4 inches so that we can fold it over on the waistband. So we're going to just mark that, and we're going to mark it at the 58 inches. So we want 4 inches here and a little more. So let's do 5. Okay. That's about 40. So there we go, with about 58. So now we'll cut that out. And then we're ready to just finish sewing all these pieces together. And with that, we'll also then work on the clasps to hold our kilt together. What I use on the inside are buttons, and I do 2 sets of buttons with a buttonhole so that you can take it in if your waist gets smaller. And it's still not too big, so it can do a couple sizes that way without any major adjustments to the kilt. So and again, trimming off my edge here so that it's smooth. And we're all ready to move in to the sewing room now and take care of the other part. Okay, on to the next phase. There's our waistband, which we're going to set aside over here, and we're going to start in our kilt, which we'll set down there, and we're going to start here with sewing this together. And I like to make this really sturdy, so one of the ways I feel like that works is to actually make this a French seam or a felled seam to where it's hidden in the middle there. So you sew it wrong sides together. This is like a French seam. I just find it easy and it works very well. And then we fold it over right sides together and stitch that edge into the middle of it. Voila. And then I like to just help it lay flat by doing a top stitch. To help flatten it down and keep it nice and flat. I'll do it this way so you can see what I'm doing there. So I'm just laying that flat and stitching it down on the other edge. And there's other ways of doing this, so if you're experienced, go ahead and do it whichever way you like best. That's gonna work just fine. Then we take it with our kilt and we do wrong sides together. Well, first we're going to hem it. Almost forgot that part. It's easier to do all the hemming before. So we will measure it out, the 58 inches, a little more, so we'll probably go 59 just so that we have plenty to roll under on the sides. Which brings us right here. Oh, I don't think you can see that. I was just measuring it out here, and it brings us to 59 inches so that we have a ½ inch on each side. I'm going to put a little mark there. And you can draw a line, or you can just fold it and cut it right on that fold. So now that piece can go over there, and now we're going to hem it. Hem both edges. And the bottom. And I'm showing you most of this from the lighter side, the wrong side, when I can, just because it's easier for you to see. Let's move that back around here. Maybe even bring it down a little so you can see a little better. There we go. Clipping it. I'm kind of a neater seamstress. I like to try and get all of this in the garbage, which I have right next to me, and I have as many garbage cans as I can possibly get in so that I don't have to pick threads out of my carpet, because unfortunately I have a carpet in my sewing room. And it's not something I have the option on taking out at this point, so. I like to put all my pieces back into where they belong as I work with them, so I try to have like my containers, the needles and pins and stuff really handy, so I have multiple ones all over. And what I'm doing here is I'm hemming the bottom of the facing. That helps hold our kilt all firm and steady so it doesn't stretch out at the top. And so now that you see that, I'm just going to pause for the minute or two that it takes me to do this, and then I'll be right back. Okay, we're back here, and now we have this all hemmed and ready to set onto the top of our kilt. So we want this piece to be pretty side out, just because that's fun. And we'll clip it on here. And it depends on your skill level. You don't have to clip this on. You can free sew this if that's what you want to practice with, or you have the skill level to do that. I just want to show this so that nobody gets frustrated if you're at a lower skill level. So whatever your skill level, you can add steps together. Like you could actually put the back of the waistband on at the same time you do this before basting it down. But if you don't feel that comfortable with it, then just do it the way I'm doing it here, because this way you're sure that every step gets done and every piece is, you know, put in where it belongs. Now it doesn't matter to us so much right now that this is fraying a little as we're working with it, because this is all going to be inside the waistband. So that's not an issue for us, because we're going to put part of the waistband on, and then we're going to work at putting the buckles on, because part of the buckles actually need to be inside the waistband. I use a belt and a buckle. You can cut it off a belt if you have one you don't mind repurposing, or you can get a piece of leather, or if you've repurposed a belt, you can use that. For it. Now, the part that I often get confused with on myself is whether we wrap right or left, because supposedly there's a rule to that, whether you're a man or a woman. One way, if you're one, you wrap one way, if another, you wrap the other. So I have it written on my wall that for men, you wrap it to the left. So I do have this correct. No, the buttonholes are on the left. So I do have this correct, but I was actually wrapping it backwards. Okay, so I just kind of wrap it to check that I have everything on the right side, because I don't need to go all the way to the end on this, because this end is actually going to fold over and be sewn flat like this. So we're okay with that. And now we're just going to sew this down. I'm gonna sew that down, starting from the side and across the top, and then I'll be back and we'll put our waistband on. Okay, so we have it all sewed on now, and we want to fold over the left side about 3 inches, and then just sew that down across the top. This gives a little weight to the front of our kilt where we're crossing it over. It helps it hold in place. And if you like, you can just sew this all the way down, which I do like to do. So we're just going to do that. Take it and sew it all the way down to the bottom, just holding that bracket in place. If I were making a kilt out of something else and to wear more formally, I would not sew this bracket down, by the way, just because then I like to make those be a little more authentic. This one's just kind of a fun piece. So we now have the basis of our kilt all together. So we've got our pleats in, which need another heavy ironing or two, but they're getting there. A heavy pressing. We have our placket in, our interfacing in, we have our placket in. So now we'll put our waistband on. And how we want to do that is to start by pinning it on, and we want it to be right sides together first. You leave a little bit on this edge, and why we do that is because we're going to sew that down when we sew the waistband over. Again, you can clip it, pin it, whatever works for you, or just if you have the skill level or want to practice it and don't mind taking out if you mess up, go ahead and just start on one end and sew it down to the other. I kind of have my own pattern here where I pin it down and then it leaves me at the starting point on the other side. So I'm like only going one direction at a time. Now, depending on what you're using your kilt for, you can close it with Velcro, because that's what we'll be going after getting our waistband on, or you can close it with buttons and buckles. I happen to like buttons and buckles because I just happen to like buttons and buckles. There's a little bit of steampunk in me, I guess, so I like using the buttons and buckles. And we have a little bit extra here, which is always good. And you can always use your extras for things like what you have left over for this can make into really cool coasters. I might do a little video of them at another point in time. So here I have plenty left over, so that's really good. I have it on my other end to where we'll be able to sew our waistband down. And I'm just going to start here and sew it down. I do a back stitch here where I don't always do a back stitch if another seam is going to cross over. But if you really need something to stay, be sure you do use a back stitch. Having learned in production sewing that you don't always need to do a back stitch, because you're going to sew over the top of that seam, which is going to hold it in place, and it just saves you a little bit of time. But if you want to be sure your ends stick like that, and like in this case we really do, then a back stitch is like the perfect thing to do right there. This one's not quite as long as the others, so I didn't put you on pause, but go. Clip that off. So there we are with that. Slide that back so you can all see. And now what we're going to do is we're going to self-line this. And what I mean by that is we're going to fold it and then fold it again, so that we're folding this basically in half, and then we're folding that half down so that it meets this line right here. And this one I'm going to use pins because I want it to hold right there. And you want it to measure that 1.5 inches for our waistband. But this way I don't have to worry about interfacing it with anything else. I'm just doing a self-interfacing, which is absolutely acceptable in the sewing world. I learned that actually in my sewing class in college, the self-facing. And sometimes it's really good for, you can really do that, and this is one of those cases. There's other kinds where you don't really want to do that. But as far as this waistband, it's actually very easy, convenient, and helpful. Because we don't need it to be super stiff. This will give it a stiffening of the exact weight of the fabric. So all of that works out well. And those of you who already sew, it's fine. You don't have to agree with me. We each have our own ways of doing things, and guess what? That's good. That's okay. Now, when I get to the end here, I'm actually just going to turn this over and stitch it down. And you'll probably want to back stitch on both sides of that. Then we can trim this down to where it's about 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch. And turn it over, getting our nice sharp point. So we're ready to sew that down. Going back the other direction now. Again, periodically measuring that I have it at 1.5 inches and not more. Bringing it just right over that line. All right, and now we're going to stitch right on the edge here, all the way down. Trying to be sure we don't bend any of our pleats either underneath while we're sewing. We don't want to catch any of those funny, because then we have to go back and fix it. That always causes frustration. It's just a part of our sewing life, but none of us like to take things out. Eventually you get to a point where it's just like, okay, that's what I have to do. Especially if you're just starting, it's getting frustrating because you feel like everything takes so long. But that's okay too. All part of learning processes and figuring it out. I also make little kilts for toddlers, and actually anybody could use them, but I found it's very good for toddlers who are potty training, especially running around outside. But it makes it easy for them because they don't have to try and whip off their diaper or pull down their pull-ups or their little bigger girl panties. While they're potty training, they can just flip up their kilt. And so we have them for both boys and girls in my store, RK Artisans. Now the other thing I like on these, just because these are super comfy casual kilts, is to go ahead and sew around here just to keep everything in your waistband all sturdy and holding up, standing up straight, so it doesn't bend over. So I just do a little box like this around the top. And then I'll work on closing our kilt, how we keep it closed. Like I say, this is a flannel kilt. It's a casual kilt. It's not formal attire. My formal attire kilts I make much more traditionally. Number 2 son and son-in-law. Both of them have formal black kilts that I made them for their weddings. And those were done very traditionally. Then down. There we go. So now our kilt, let's turn this up and over this way. Hello again. Now our kilt is all ready. We are going to put in a buttonhole, either one, or you can do 2. I'll do 1 in this case here, and then right here where the pleats start, I'll put a button in here, and then I'll put a button back here and a button up here. So it'll have 3 buttons so that you can have 3 adjustments. But the original button I want to be right where this kilt measured for. Then on the other side here, you can and you could use Velcro in place of a button there. You could use Velcro here and here. This is where I put in a buckle, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Okay, so I have the machine set up now for our buttonhole. We have our button, that size that we want to use, which is a standard pant button size that I use. And I've set my machine to do the automatic buttonhole. And then we're going to mark our buttonhole here, so that we can pretty much see where we want it. And we want it right here in the middle. Then we slide it under here, and I love my buttonholer on this machine. I think it is the most awesome buttonholer ever because it's so easy to use. I unplug my foot pedal for the minute so that it runs on automatic, and then I press my start stop button and I let it go to down. Except for trying to keep it somewhat straight, I just let it do its thing. The machine I'm currently using is a Janome Magnolia 7330. It is an awesome machine. I've almost wore it out in most aspects. Luckily not the buttonholer. I will be upgrading to professional machines just because I do mainly clothes and I don't need all the fancy stitches. But most of our home machines can work really good even if we're sewing professionally. So here's our buttonhole. We're going to cut it open. And then we'll be all ready to put our button knots on the inside. And so now, and you would do the same thing on the other end here if we were going to use a button instead of the buckle. We would just make our buttonhole here. Okay. So what I have to finish this off is an old belt, and I'm going to use both ends, this side and this side, and we're going to cut them off. Which is always fun, cutting through the leather and then sewing through it. But there's a special needle for that. So we all need to be aware of that. I'm going to cut this one off here. Oh, I didn't turn it down so y'all could see. Let me do that for you. Okay, so here's the buckle, and I have it cut off there. Should probably make it a little neater across there because that would be cool. And it's already got the buckle in it, and I've cut this end off here like this. Now this end will go in here, and I can put it inside there, or I can just sew it in like right there. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and add more holes to this, and I have a tool that'll actually do that because we don't want it too big. So we're going to actually change out this needle for a leather needle. Which I have a few of. And leather needles are cool because they are made to go through leather by being triangular. If you don't have a leather needle available, you can use a jeans needle, definitely in the 16, 18 category, and you want to go slowly. You do not want to go quickly through that. And you can change your thread to jeans thread, which is thicker. Let's see if I still have some black. I do, or blue. So I will change these out because the thicker thread works better with your leather. That's why we would change it out to that. It's a little thicker thread made to go through thicker things. Change out my bobbin and change my foot back to the normal foot. Now, don't use leather unless your machine can handle it. You can also make the these pieces out of cloth and use grommets to buckle them with also. This is just what I like to do. And since I'm demonstrating it for you, that's what you get. All right. So on the inside here, and I want to give it a good amount there so that I can get it nice and sturdy. And I'm kind of following the stitching that's already in the sides of our buckle. Oh, I forgot to plug in my foot here. Let's make sure we got the on the machine there. Trying to make that a little closer or smaller. So let's try this way so you can kind of see what I'm actually doing here. There we go. I think that'll work. There we go. Oh, let's change it back to where we want it to be. Not a zigzag, a straight stitch. And I want it to be a longer stitch for this. I have it at 2.8 to 3. And see, it works really well when we're sewing in the holes that are already there. It can be a little harder, see, when we're going through new holes, which is what I'm doing here. So just go slow and get it right into there, turning it around. And now we're going to do it again through an area that has not been sewed before. So just kind of hold your piece firm. There we go. And you can do that twice. On this end in particular, I'm going to sew it back again. I see I just turned it around there. And it's a little easier on it. Just to give it an extra little bit of hold there. And we clip all our extra stuff off, and now we'll do the other side. So we've got that all in. See, sewed like that, sewed like that. And then we want to come right here, and we're going to sew this down, and then we're going to sew a piece of material over the top of it so that it looks better. And this one is twice as thick, so it's going to be a little bit harder. So we may have to do it by hand, or open it up here and do it a little bit differently. Oop, I have it a little too high there, but okay, we are done. So on this side, we have our buckle and we have our buttons on the inside. I've made it for 3 sizes. This is a 40, this is a 38, this would be a 42. So when it's, oh, I put the buttons on the wrong side. So we will put the buttons back on this side when we're done. And then it'll button over here. And then we have the buckle, so it can buckle here. Though I did put those buttons on the wrong side, so I'll have to take them off and redo them. And that'll be able to buckle from there on out, because we're going to add two more holes with my handy dandy little hole press. I have they're like pliers, except they poke holes into leather. So that's handy dandy. So I will change this, and then this one will be all done. So basically, that's how you make a kilt. This is Ruthie of Ruthie Case.